Hello everyone, in this video we are going to create a real effort task app in oTree, and in this app subjects are shown two random numbers and then they have to add them up. And while we are doing this we are going to learn how we can handle payments of subjects, and also we are going to look at how apps with multiple rounds work. So our subjects are going to do our real effort task multiple times in a row. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to create the app. So again we open our terminal. And then we need to navigate into our oTree folder. So we type cd and test project, in my case. And then we are going to start a new app with the oTree start app command. And I'm going to name it real effort and numbers, maybe, because you might have different real effort tasks. So I want to put numbers in here. We have created the app folder. Let's open and close this and see that it's here. And the next thing we want to do is we want to add it to our settings.py session config list. So we are just going to copy this app here and paste. And just press tab here once to have the indentation work correctly. And then we are gonna go here, we're just gonna copy the name. We're not gonna actually rename this. And put it here, and here, and here we are going to write a description, a task in which subjects add numbers. And also what we are going to do here is we're going to set our demo participants to 1. So the demo participants is when you just open a test session, how many participants will be in the session. Since this is a single player game, we really just need 1. So I would recommend to always just set this one to the minimum size of players you need for your experiment. So 1 for single player games, and then for multiplayer games, whatever the number of interacting players is. For example, like 2 for Prisoner's Dilemma. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to go to our models.py and add some fields for the player. So we want to record which number the player entered. So we're gonna create a field we call number entered equals models dot. I'm going to use an integer field here. So now you need to choose whether you just want to use whole numbers, in which case you would want an integer field, or if you want decimal numbers you would use a float field. But for now I just want to use whole numbers. And so that's all the information that we want to store. If you might remember that I said we're also going to do payments in this experiment, but we don't actually need to add a new field for this. So oTree has a payment field automatically created that just doesn't show up here. But there's another thing that we want here. So we want to decide how much money subjects are going to get per correct answer. And this is going to be the same for our subject. So we're just going to create a constant up here, and I'm going to call it payment. Just call it payment per correct answer. So you might also want to choose something shorter here, but I personally think, especially if you develop larger experiments, it's good to have names that are a bit longer but a bit more explicit, so that later on you don't confuse what different variables mean. And let's just say I want to pay our subjects 1 per correct answer. Now the question is, what does this 1 mean? What is the currency of this 1? And to do this we go back to the settings. And in here we have a variable that is called use points, which I'm going to set to false right now. So what this does is that oTree allows you to use an experimental currency instead of US dollars. So if you don't want your subjects' monetary incentives to be displayed directly in a real world currency like US dollar, but you want to use something else, you set use points to false, and then you define a conversion ratio between points and real world currency, and then your subjects might see a payoff of 1,000 points, which is then going to be converted into maybe 10 US dollar. But for now I want to work with US dollar directly, so I set this to false. And the next thing that we are going to do is we're going to our pages.py, and first of all we need to import something, we need to type import random in here. And we want to do this because we are later on gonna generate random numbers that our subjects are going to set up, and Python has a method to generate random numbers, but this method is inside a module, and the module is called the random module. So when we want to generate random numbers in Python, every time in the top of the page we need to import this module that's called random. And now we can actually implement this. So we go in here, we go to our add numbers page, and we're going to define a method. We're going to call it vars for template, and put it write return and this, and a colon up here. And now we are going to generate two numbers. So we're gonna have two variables. We call them number 1 equals, and now we're gonna use the random model. So we're gonna type random dot randint in here. So random is this model, randint is random integer. So we're gonna generate whole numbers here. And now we just need to have the lowest and the highest number that we want. So we want to generate numbers between 1 and 100, maybe. And then we're going to have the same for number 2. Number 2 is going to be the same. And now we are going down here, and we're gonna put number 1 in quotation marks, and then again number 1, and the same for number 2. And what this does, so here everything we are writing a dictionary. So if you remember from your Python tutorial, everything in curly brackets is a dictionary. And what we are doing here is we are going to put two labels in here. So this dictionary has two labels. It has the labels number 1 and number 2, and here the values stored in there are the random values that we have just generated down here. So I could have also renamed this differently. For example, we could, instead of having the underscore, we could have an empty space here or something, but I just keep it the same. And what this does is, like the name vars for template suggests, this generate variables that we then can later on use in our template file. So in the template, remember, is what the subject sees, so the web page that the subject sees. And if we want to display numbers to the subject, then we need to store them or send them to the template. Yeah, but what we also want to do right now is we also want to store these variables, because later on we want to calculate results, and we want to find out if the subject has the correct number. So we need to store something, maybe just store the sum. So we're just gonna create a new field, we call it sum down here, and it's gonna be equal number 1 plus number 2. I think we're going to should rename it, because sum is a value that is already used by a Python function. So some special values are kind of already recognized, or already used for Python internal things, and you don't want to use them yourself, because then you can override some Python functionality. So I'm just going to use it, call it sum of numbers. And now going to go back to our models.py, and we are going to create a new field here. It's called sum of numbers for the player, and then we are going to actually store it in this field. So we are going to just add player self.player here, player.sum of numbers. And so what this does is, by calling self, we are referring to whatever object calls this code, and this is going to be the page. So we are currently inside a page, so self is going to refer to the page that the subject sees. But when we want to access the player, that is on this page, and from this player we want to access the field sum of numbers, and we want to store this inside this field. So now we have it stored and we can use it later on. Okay, so then the second thing that we want to do on the pages.py is we want to actually check if the player made the correct calculation. And to do this we need the information. So we are going to create a method and we call it before next page. And what this does is this is run after the player clicks the next button on the page, and it already gives us access to all the information that we generated before that. So all the numbers that we generated down here and also the user input from the player is all going to be available for this method. And what we want to do is we want to compare our sum here with the number that the player entered. So we are going to type if, and then this one, self.player.sum of numbers equals equals. So equals is a comparison. That's important. If you write equals, then you define something like that. Here I said number 1 should be equal to this. Whereas if you type equals, then this tells Python to check whether the two things are equal. So it's important not to confuse the two. And this is supposed to be equal to whatever the player entered. So we have this field, we have self.player.number entered. And if this is the case, then we want to add one to the payoff. So we use self.player.payoff. And remember, as I told you, we don't need to add the field payoffs down here, because this exists for all players in oTree automatically. And we want to use plus equal. So plus equal means that we want to add to the existing payoff here. No, maybe let's just use equal here for now, because we are only actually assigning one payoff. So if we would have multiple payoffs in one round, we would want to use plus equal, and then we would want to initialize the payoff at 0 and then add up all the different payoffs. But since we only have one payoff per round, we can just directly send it to equal. That's a bit easier. And it's supposed to be equal to whatever we defined here, so the payment per correct answer. So we're just going to copy this and we're going to type constants dot payment per correct answer. So always remember that if you want to access the player, this is always in lower caps, and constants is always in uppercase. So there is a reason for this, but going into that is a bit more detail than we need for this tutorial. So I would just say remember player is lowercase, constants is uppercase. Okay. So now we are done here. We don't need to do anything else for the next page. But the last thing that is left is we need to actually implement the model. So we are going to need to tell the page what kind of user input we want here. So again, we're going to form model player, and then form fields equal to this one, to the number entered here. So we don't need to add the sum of numbers in here, because this is not something that the player enters. This is what we internally calculate. So when we calculate something directly in Python, even though we store it here in the model, we don't need to add it here. We only need to add things here that is user input from the web page. Okay. So we have this all set up, and then finally here in this here we are going to go to the results page. We can ignore the wait page for now. So wait pages are used in multiplayer games when you need to wait for other players to finish before you can go to the next task, but we don't actually need, so we can just delete it. And here in the results class, we don't actually need to add anything, because all we want to do on the results page is display the payoff. And you're going to see that we don't need to do anything here to do this. So we can go directly into our template. And here in our template, in the title, I want to tell the subject what they're supposed to do. So we type, please add the numbers. And then here we are going to get our variables from the templates. So they're called number 1 and number 2. So we're going to use double curly brackets and then this plus, and the same for number 2. So whenever you want to use a variable from Python here in the template, you put it inside of double curly brackets. So we have equals and a question mark. And down here we need an input field. So the input field, because we just have one, we can just put form fields. And ready. And now on the results page, we just want to call the title results. And then here we are going to just tell the participant the payoff. So your payoff is, and then again double curly brackets. And now we want to access the payoff. And as I mentioned on the pages.py, we don't need to put it into vars for templates like we did here. Right here I said when you want to access something on the template, you need to define this vars for template function and then have return with a dictionary and these things in here, so number 1 and number 2. But actually, things that are stored inside of any of the models, you can automatically access in the template. So all the things stored in the player model and all the constants you can directly access, and you just type player dot and then no constants. Wait, no, player dot payoff. Sorry, player dot payoff, because this is what we want to access here. Yeah, and so this should all work now. So we can test this. And we go back to our terminal down here and type oTree dev server and see what it does. Okay, we don't get any issues. Let's open a page and we want to add up the numbers. And let's see, so here, let me just for start enter a wrong number. So we can see I entered the wrong number, our results are 0. And then let's try again with a correct number. So this is 74. And now our payoff is 1 because we entered the thing correctly. Okay. So now we have this done, but as I said in the beginning of this video, we want to do a little bit more. We want to have multiple rounds. So to do this, it's very simple. We just put rounds to something else than 1 here. I'm going to put it to 2. And now if we play the game, then all the pages are basically repeated twice. But let's also do a little bit more. So maybe we want our results from each round, but we also want to know what our combined result from all the rounds is. So to do this, I'm gonna add a new page, and I'm just gonna copy this and name it combined results. Combined results. And here, what I want to do is I want to again have vars for template. And now we need to add up the results. And to do this, we actually need the information from the previous rounds. And we need each player is actually defined as one player in one round. So every round will kind of be treated as a separate player in Python. So we want to get all the players that belong to the different rounds. So in this case, I just have 2 rounds, so that we want the player from round 1 and player from round 2. We want to access their payoff, and then we want to add that one up. So to do this, oTree has a function, and I'm gonna just type all players here, and then equals self dot player dot in all rounds. And now what this gives us a list of the player in all the rounds that of the experiment. In this case, it's just 2 rounds. And now we want to loop through all these players and add up their payoff. So I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it combined payoff and set it to 0. And then I'm going to use a for loop. So for player in all players, I want to add to the combined payoff. So I use plus equal this player's payoff. So player.payoff. And now what this does is it adds up the payoff of all rounds, and no matter how many rounds I set. So I just set 2 for now, but if I would set 10, I would also add up all of these. And then finally we want to return this combined payoff into our template. So here again we type return and this. But now there's one more thing that we need to do, because right now, as I mentioned, each round displays all the pages. So right now this page would be displayed every round, and we don't want that. We only want it in the last round. And for this we're going to use another function which is called isDisplayed. Okay, and no, def is displayed. And for this function, basically what this does is we need to return something. We need to return either true or false, and if we return false, then this page is not displayed, and if we return true, then this page is displayed. So we are going to write if self dot round number, so if the current round number equals constants dot num rounds, then we want to return true, and else we want to return false. So this is what we want to do here. And just for logic, so constants num rounds is the number of rounds, and if the round number is equal to the number of rounds, this means that we are in the last round. So we can just we want to display this page only in the last round. And this is just how to write this down, but I'm actually going to change it a little bit now. So there's a shorthand for this, and the shorthand for this would be we could just return this one, and then we don't need this. So I just put the other thing earlier on because it's more readable. So what this one does is, if you look at this is a comparison, right? So it compares whether this is equal to this, and then this one automatically becomes true if this comparison is correct, and false if it's not the same. Okay, now one last thing we need to do in the pages.py is we need to add this one here to our page sequence to tell oTree that we want to use this page. And then we need to create a template. So to do this, I'm just going to copy the results template here, and I'm going to name it combined results. So this always needs to be the same as the class. So if you name this combined results here, you need to name this combined results here. And now we're going to change this label. We're going to change to your combined payoff is, and then it's not going to be player.payoff is going to be this combined payoff that we returned here. Okay. So now we are done with this, and we can go back to the browser and see if it worked. Can create a new session here and add up some numbers. And this is 67. And as you can see, our combined payoff is 2, so everything worked. And this was the end of this tutorial, so thanks for watching and see you on the next one.